Cue the new theme music! Power Quest was developed and published by Sunsoft and Japan Supply System in 1998 for the Game Boy Color. It's notable for being one of the few decent handheld fighters of the 90s that was developed on anything other than the Neo Geo Pocket. It's also one of the earlier examples of a fighting/RPG hybrid game before the recent glut of the mid-noughts, or mid-noughties, or, well, whatever this decade's going to be called in the future. And although the RPG elements are flawed, the core game still holds up to this day. The story of Power Quest takes place in a typical toy battling scenario. There's a brand new battling craze called modeling that's sweeping the nation. Remote-controlled action figures that can move and fight like real martial artists. It's extremely similar to other games and TV shows in this vein, such as Custom Robo or Metabots, although it's one of the few works of fiction with this setup that plays it straight and treats it as a game, rather than some sort of trap unleashed upon an unsuspecting public by some shadowy organization which will be used to take over the world through some convoluted scheme or whatever. You play as a nameless kid who gets bulldozed into a town-wide tournament by another child who the game insists is your best friend, although you wouldn't be able to tell by the way he treats you. Most of my best friends offer me some sort of salutation when they see me for the first time of the day, but this dude pulls you into some competition. To be honest, he seems like the type of person that most people would stay away from. He's got the creepiest face I've ever seen, he's got the word boys plastered across his sweater, and he refuses to do anything unless you tag along. Speaking of creepy, most of the NPCs have this crudely drawn blank expression on their faces that you have to look at whenever you speak to them. But I'm going off on a tangent here. So, the main goal is to win a series of tournaments, most of which are fairly short. By fighting other robo enthusiasts called modelers, you earn credits which can be used to upgrade your fighter, which will then allow you to go on and fight in bigger tournaments. However, on average, you only get 20 credits from regular fights, while even the most basic upgrades start out in the hundreds. This huge gap between the cost of items that are directly linked to the game's difficulty and the cash flow that comes from playing the game naturally is a scenario that I like to call the Red Star paradigm. That's when developers pad out a game's total playtime by throwing in an extremely unbalanced element of grinding. It draws its namesake from the Red Star, a PS2 shooter/brawler which featured an extremely strict upgrade system where costs were high and points were limited. Power Quest is a prime example of this scenario since the story mode itself is only 2 hours long, but the excessive amount of grinding adds another 2 to 3 hours on top of all that, until you either reach the end game, where it's insultingly easy to earn credits, or just abandon it altogether. The good news is that the RPG trappings don't actually matter, since all of the playable models are unlocked and fully upgraded in Versus mode, and the fighting is where the real action is. Max is the closest thing to a Shoto, although he doesn't have the traditional move list. Axe is a charge character, Speed is the obligatory fast, lithe female character, and Gong is a grappler, and surprisingly, a decent one at that. Ron is the most interesting fighter, a send-up of the old Hermit Master stick and the only one with a varied move list. And then there's Borat. I'll talk about him in a bit. They don't have any real personality aside from their movement, but they're all fairly well animated and have real weight in their movements and attacks, except for Borat. A far cry from the bizarre SD movement of SNK's original work on their Neo Geo Pocket console, or their outsourced Netto King of Fighters series, developed by Takara, which treated gravity and momentum as mere suggestions rather than guidelines. It's a straightforward 2D button fighter. Everyone, except for Bora, has one button for light attacks and another for strong attacks. The characters all have an overhead attack, 3 special moves with varying combinations of quarter circle, dragon punch, and charge motions, and at least one super move, which is powered by the standard 3-level power bar. Except for Borat, who may actually be one of the most useless fighting game characters that I've ever seen. All he can do is walk and punch, he can't even jump. He's not even that good of a training dummy since he's shorter than the average height for a model. He's just all around awful, and since he belongs to the main character's self-appointed best friend, it's probably no surprise that he's the worst character in the game. The game really shines in versus mode, but it's doubtful that you'll ever find anyone who remembers it living near you. It's weighted down by the tedious RPG backdrop and garish, generic setting, but in spite of it all, Power Quest was a great handheld fighter for its time, and other fighters in the same generation, as well as many after it, would have done well to follow its example. As things stand now, its only draw is its historical value, and perhaps some nostalgia for those that actually bought it way back when, but that's still more than a lot of old portable fighters have going for it right now. Not too bad for a game that was only released in the US, Portugal, and Italy.